East Timor is an adventure motorcyclist's dream. We've been just getting set up out here ready to go, and we've just met Salvador. It's like talking about the brotherhood of bikers. Salvador, you said you're a member of
Dili Custom Motor DCMC.
Dili Custom Motor Club.
Custom Motorbike, yeah.
Yeah, and he's been giving us some tips on who to meet when we go to West Nusa Tenggara or West Timor. Yeah, it's been great. We've had a lovely breakfast together.
Yep.
Safe trip, brotherhood motorbike.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Come on.
Wowee! Look at that! What an amazing morning's ride this has been! It's just been like, on one side of the mountain you've got this very dry, dusty side, and then you hit the top of the mountain, the rain comes, and then you come over the top and it is like tropical, gorgeous, huge casts just popping up out of the ground. And then look at this, middle of just the side of the road. While we're here, we're gonna stop for a coffee at this place here. I'm looking at those, I think, noodles. I love noodles, packet noodles. Who says we don't enjoy the local culture? Harry's in a race. We overtook him, and I just don't think he was very happy with being overtaken, so increased his speed.
Got to follow and film this guy for a bit. I just let him pass me because he was like hot on my tail, but I'm here on a 650cc. Guessing he's not anything over a 250. Don't know what's in those bags, but the top looks like fruit, so it's got to be heavy. Nice, very nice riding.
Carry on.
I want to try the steep one.
No! We didn't see the real way. Woo! I'm gonna go that way.
I feel like we need to travel around, and when people go, oh, don't take that road, you're like, which road exactly? Because people are like, oh, this one's out. You're probably just better going back to Dili and then south from there. And this has been so much fun.
Yeah.
Even just winding along the roads, there's little dirt tracks to the side, the whoops.
Beautiful as well.
Yeah, and usually to go on something that I enjoy this much, I've got to be going not the right way, and it's often like in and out same track. Whereas this is like, this is where we're going. This is the way.
What is this road?
How much does this look like a road from an apocalypse movie? Perfectly sealed, intact, slowly getting consumed by nature. Ow! Ah! Right in the face! Ah! Really good.
Just put that in a couple of months ago. Can you explain that road to me?
I can try.
Pretty sure this is the spot. There's the river mouth. You can see around there's the coastline, and then straight out there somewhere is Australia.
Just pulled up here. Look at the size of that croc. Big, right? Big. Very big. I want to see if I can ride on the beach. There's some little croc snacks. Snackadile. Alright, this is going to wait here. I'm going to try and get down the beach a bit. See this wreck. Tell this story. Let's see how.
On the sand where you ended up?
I think, yeah, I took them off on the sand where I ended up, and then I think they might have fallen off somewhere. Maybe we'll try and turn around.
He's lost his sunnies. Like a man with sunglasses on. Where's your sunnies?
Didn't find them.
See if I can slowly ride this up to him. I'm guessing he's tired of turning around for me today, so he's decided not to turn around. Alright, let's go. You're having a good day? Yeah, just hurt my hip.
No problem. No problem. Okay.
Oh, did you get a bug?
Right in my eye.
Yes, it's sort of bug o'clock, isn't it? Harry's got something against number plates, I think. That's what he's done when he's driven up against me.
What this means is when she refused to get out of the way.
Harry, that's not what happened. It wasn't even possible for me to move forward. I'm trying to move forward and couldn't move forward. Don't be pissy at me because you've knocked me over. I didn't do anything wrong. I stopped to get you your fender, to give it to you, and then you've knocked me over. Don't make this my fault. We're just saying how much the pub we're in, or the restaurant we're in, looks like an Aussie pub.
Yeah. Wouldn't be out of place in somewhere in the Northern Territory.
A bit more bamboo than we're used to.
Yeah. We've made up. I've apologised to Liz for being an arse to her.
All is well again. Incredible day's ride. Like, just cannot get over how good the day's ride was. Everything we did was fab. From slipping over in the slick mud.
Yep. Me crashing after my hill climb.
Oh yeah, over the bridge.
The bad bits were good, the good bits were good.
Yeah. Crocodile was good.
The crocodile was unfathomably huge.
Big.
Just chilling there, blowing bubbles in the water.
So we are in Same. We are only about 50k from Dili, so we've got another morning's ride and a few things we want to go and check out tomorrow. But we're just going to have dinner and then get back to our hotel. You okay?
Coffee.
Coffee?
They're drying coffee. So I want to ask where they grow it.
Oh, okay.
Here?
Bunut. Coffee bunut. Bunut is Indonesian for tree.
Bahasa Indonesia? Tahu. Bunut? Kopi di mana? Kopi di sini. Di sini, yeah.
Ah.
Ini.
Ah, there, this is coffee. Aha!
Ini cafe.
Cafe.
Nih.
Aha. Coffee.
Yeah.
Aha! Obrigado.
Yeah. You're probably wondering why we've been scooting all over East Timor to see otherwise unremarkable beaches and all sorts of weird places along the way. It's because I wanted to retell the story of my granddad, John Rivers Key. He was stationed here with the 2nd 4th Independent Company, a commando unit in Second World War. I wanted to explain a bit about what he's done. So what you're going to see now is a bit out of geographic order, but in chronological order, why I've been to the place, why we've been to the places we've been to, so that we can retell his story.
Now you might be wondering why I've ridden a long way down a crocodile-infested beach that seems otherwise unremarkable. It's because I want to talk about that sometimes peeking its head above the waves. My grandfather, John Rivers Key, in 1941 was probably, I think, 17 years old, but he'd lied so that he could join the army. And he originally joined the 2nd, then became part of the 2nd, 4th Independent Company. Independent companies later became known as commandos. They were trained in guerrilla warfare. So, 1941, 2nd Independent Company arrives at Kupang, heads to Dili. That drags East Timor into the war. Arguably, Japan would have ignored East Timor altogether. But having Allied troops in East Timor drew them in. So they land a few months later with a significant force. The 2nd, those commandos were incredibly effective. They would do hit and run guerrilla war strategies, and one of the things that made them particularly effective was that they were really nice to the locals. They worked together hand in hand with the locals, while the Portuguese and later the Japanese treated many of the locals like dirt, like they were sort of some subhuman citizens. The Australians were renowned for making friends with them, learning to speak their language a bit, and generally building rapport. What this meant was that each of those men would get paired up with what they called a criado, which means servant, but to the East Timorese that word now has a much stronger sense of partners. These criados might be incredibly young, by the way. They would be locals, but they might be sort of fighting age males all the way down to sort of 8, 9, 10-year-olds. So they've been harassing the Japanese for months, really bothering the Japanese, but they've also taken a few casualties. So when they call for reinforcements, it's my granddad's 2nd, 4th, the Lancer Company, I think it is Lancer, we'll call them Lancer, are brought across in the HMAS Voyager. They land here on the date that I'm showing right here on the screen, because it's just slipped my mind and it's up there in Liz's computer. They land here on the HMAS Voyager, and as they're unloading, the plan is they're going to send off the sick and unwell 2nd as they bring in the 2nd, 4th. But there's a bit of a problem with this. A swell starts pushing the Voyager up against the beach, and it eventually, they would have turned on the propellers to back it up, but there's a load of people in the raft right then trying to get ashore. And so the captain didn't want to turn on the screws and start trying to maneuver the vessel, lest that raft of people get sucked into the engines and killed. So unable to do anything, they all just watch as the boat eventually gets beached. And that's what you can see there. I read somewhere somebody thinks it might be a part of a boiler. That's all that remains of the HMAS Voyager. There may be more out there, and I did Google into diving that wreck, but I've just seen my first crocodile 10 minutes ago, and it was enormous, so I'm not going into water. Anyway, he arrives off the boat here, and he is about to start a pretty impressive campaign against the Japanese, where by the peak of it, they have an entire division tied up here. What you're talking about is 500 Australian soldiers harassing and bothering and tying up 12,000 Japanese, who by the peak of this are desperately searching for them, hunting them down and killing them. I just wonder what it was like for him, what kind of thoughts were going through his head, and how different the world is now. When I first asked my granddad what he did in the war, and he told me he was a signaller, it was his job to have a radio and relay messages from a mountaintop by himself, I remember thinking, that sounds incredibly boring. I wanted a cool granddad. But once I started researching what that really meant, it suddenly became clear how fascinating and dangerous that job was. As a signaller, his job was to sit on a mountainside somewhere here to the east of Dili and report on what the Japanese were doing. They were landing craft, amassing troops. They were also trying to build an airstrip here, so this represented a significant threat to Darwin. And his job was to sneakily hide through the undergrowth here with binoculars, see what was going on, and report that back to Darwin. The reason that was incredibly dangerous was because the Japanese, by the time the 2nd, 4th were here, were intent on rooting out these commandos. They had been carrying out all sorts of incredibly successful attacks. One of the first reports that John Key had to radio back to Australia was about an ambush where 7 trucks had been heading east out of Dili, and the second teamed up with the second force to essentially show them how it's done, and they caused 50 casualties amongst the Japanese. Grandad radioed back saying, ambush undertaken, 50 Japanese dead, 0 casualties taken, for which they were mentioned in dispatches. So it was really amazing how much these commandos were able to hold back this superior force. In fact, they were the precursor to what is now known as the SAS, the Special Air Service. They were so effective that the Japanese eventually had to make the decision to get rid of them. So they amassed more and more troops here until at one point the peak was 12,000 Japanese, and their job was just to flush out the commandos. The decision was then made in Darwin, right, we're bringing them all home. So the second and the second fourth were told, you're being evacuated on the Arunta, but we want a very small force to remain behind and report on, continue to report on these movements. 14 men stepped forward. In one account they're described as heroes. And Grandad was among them. The 14 soldiers, after seeing off their friends on the Arunta, start heading back towards Dili. On their way, they get to Fatu Berliou, and they're camped out in a coffee plantation when a local comes running to them in a panic saying, the Japanese are on their way. It's my suspicion that the Japanese actually were, having seen the Arunta from the air, thought that it was a full-scale invasion, but maybe they were there to chase out the evacuation. We don't know. What we do know is that the Japanese come descending upon Fatu Berliou while these 14 commandos are camped out in a coffee plantation, probably not unlike this one. When this local comes running to them, screaming and warning them that the Japanese are on their way, they bolt. They split into 2 groups, a rear guard to cover their retreat, and the other ones go scattering. They're apparently running for their absolute lives, with the Japanese hot on their trails, when one of the commandos gets struck by a severe bout of dysentery. He's forced to squat right where he is and do his business. What this causes is the Japanese to catch up to them. Apparently, the Japanese came over the ridgeline, one of them waving a Japanese flag, and Bully, one of the men in the squad, I think, I'm not sure who Billy was, says, let the bastards have it, disobeying a direct order to not attack the Japanese. Apparently all of the men then start firing at the Japanese on the ridgeline. Even the commando who was busy relieving himself picks up a gun and starts firing on them, and they escape just by the skin of their teeth. That commando who was struck by that bout of dysentery was my granddad, John Key. Imagine that. You get recorded in history, and one of the things you're recorded for doing is pooping yourself in a battle. This sends them scattering. Apparently they are separated further and further until they are each man for themselves, climbing through the wilderness, hoping for help from the locals, which is becoming an increasingly difficult task since the Japanese are now, with coercion, promises and threats, starting to get more of the local East Timorese on their side. The commandos eventually regroup with the help of the locals and realise we're not getting anything useful done here. So they use their one remaining radio to call and say we need to evacuate. The Japanese, by all reports, are putting a lot of effort into hunting down these remaining commandos and trying to kill them. So they get word back from Darwin, okay, we're going to try and arrange your evacuation. We need you head south to the Dili River and wait for further word from there.
There's the coastline, and that's where they were talking about being worried about being spotted by Japanese.
It is to an area just like this, near the mouth of the Dili River, where these 28 exhausted, sick and hunted men finally make their way to get evacuated off this island. With only having a busted radio, they finally get a working radio dropped, and they're informed that they're going to be evacuated on the 10th of February, a month after they'd left their comrades on the beach at Kikras. The men are, by all reports, wasted. They've been racked by dengue and malaria, dysentery as well. They're being hunted, eaten by mosquitoes. They can apparently even hear the sounds of the dogs held by the 250 Japanese that are hunting them. So when they receive word that they're to be picked up on the 10th of February, they're really excited. The instructions tell them that they need to find a white shirt so that they can post it on the beach to signal to the USS Gudgeon that's just offshore looking for where they can pick them up. The problem is, they're so disgustingly bedraggled, they're not able to find anything white from amongst them. So apparently they go scouting around through here and eventually purloin one from one of the locals, a white sheet that they extend between two bits of bamboo to signal to the Gudgeon. Now the Gudgeon itself is quite concerned because they're worried that these messages have been intercepted by the Japanese and it's in fact a Japanese trap. So they're off the shore with their periscope up, desperately watching the beach, trying to figure out who it is that's signalling them. The chaps apparently even make a sweepstake where each person gets a randomly assigned time on the 10th, going at 15-minute increments. The winner would be the one who gets the signal from the Gudgeon that they're ready to pick them up. The Gudgeon's going to signal them the letter C, and their instructed S-Force are instructed to message back with Z. Finally, at 8:15 p.m, the signal is spotted from the Gudgeon. At which stage I would have thought they'd be elated, they'd be so excited, that's it, all of their problems are over. But they're not yet. Because they've still got 250 Japanese who are hunting them with dogs on their scent. And when they're eventually dropped some boats, only 2 of them are in serviceable condition that can only carry a couple of people each. So one brave Australian has to swim out and let the Gudgeon know, A, don't manoeuvre your vessel in there, there's an uncharted reef, you might end up on it, and 2, we need some boats. So apparently they get some volunteers from board the Gudgeon, surf the boats in, and then have to start the desperate evacuation. At this stage they're piling in criados, squaddies, people from the S-Force into these boats and paddling them out past the waves, which by all reports sounds like utter chaos. One of the boats completely capsizes and the criados on board don't know how to swim, so they're barely rescued from the surf, brought back ashore for another attempt. This time they're trying to encourage them, you need to paddle, but the language barrier is getting in the way, so he demonstrates and he takes off his boot and shows that how he can paddle with the boot, at which the criado then takes off his boot for him and immediately loses it in the ocean. The other ones he's instructing, use your shoes, try and bail out the boat. They're desperately paddling out there. Also remember, this is in the middle of the night, so they've got to keep a perfect eye on the signal light of the Gudgeon lest they lose sight of it and veer off and go the wrong way. By all reports, all of the men on board were terrified that this submarine was going to leave without them. But eventually, all 28 of them, the members of the 2nd, the S-Force that had stayed behind of the 2nd, 4th, and the criados make it on board the Gudgeon. I cannot imagine the relief of getting on board a vessel like that, albeit a vessel that had been seriously damaged by a depth charge and was noisy and unable to dive, but they were finally safe. From here, they made their way back to Australia, and we'll pick the story up later. This is just such a cool place to be able to come here and imagine what this would have been like for these people. Here we haven't even come to the right area because the right area is mangroves and filled with crocodiles. Like, just thinking of the stress and the disappointment and the being starved and sick and how humans are able to put up with that. I mean, we got really upset when we didn't get our bikes. This is just, it's so cool to come to this place. That's the end of the first part of the story about my granddad. It's been a bit of a weird episode, I think you'll agree. A little bit all over the place. It's been interesting, us filming it, going and revisiting those steps. We've really enjoyed it. We hope you have too. Thank you, as always, to our patrons, and thank you for spending your time and coming and commenting and doing all of those wonderful things. And we'll see you again in the next episode, where hopefully we'll be getting out of here and heading to West Timor. Oopsie. You okay? You're trapped under it.